Good evening, everybody, and welcome to another edition of the Sports Exchange. My name is Scott Morganroth, the Motor City Madmouth, and we have another great show lined up here today. And we will be talking about the Miami Dolphins offseason situation called Boom Wow. And obviously, the author of that article, Greg Fuchs, is here to talk about it. So before I get to Greg, I want to introduce my crew. Steve Balestrieri. Welcome back, Steve.
Always a pleasure being on with you guys.
And Rick Curti.
Hey, guys. How are you?
And last but not least, we have Greg Fuchs. Welcome back, Greg.
Glad to be here. Always excited to see you guys.
All right. Well, we're looking forward to having you on a lot more, without a doubt. So with that, Greg, I want you guys to go out there and give everybody a summary of what you wrote about.
All right. Not a problem. The Dolphins this year, they had the most salary cap space in the NFL to start a free agency, which most people think that's a great thing. My two fears were, well, there's one reason you have so much cap space. That means you got a lot of roster holes to fill. Probably have a lot of your own free agents who left the team. And then the other fear is, how wisely are the Dolphins going to spend their money? Okay, which was my biggest fear. Overall, I think they did a pretty good darn job of spending their money as opposed to a team like Jacksonville, who I think spent a lot of money on some marginal athletes, with Christian Perk being the poster boy for that. I think $18 million a year for a guy who I think is no better than a third wide receiver on a team. But the Dolphins started out strong. Didn't get the attention some of the other moves made, but re-signing Emmanuel Ogbah, the defensive end, who was far and away their biggest free agent, was huge. And they did that right before free agency started. I forgot what they paid him, $16 million a year, which, if you've seen some of the salaries players are getting these days, it's almost like a steal, $15 or $16 million. All right. And then, they just kept signing guys. I mean, right after that, they signed Chase Edmonds, who I think is going to be a great addition. Mike McDaniels, based on his 49er history, likes to use multiple running backs. So you can easily see Chase Edmonds fitting in there. And then they signed Cedric Wilson, wide receiver from the Cowboys, who I thought was very impressive this year. With all the injuries the Cowboys receivers had, he got a lot of playing time, and I like him. He's fast. He's 6'3", and I think as the third wide receiver on the team, a perfect fit. The other gigantic hole the Dolphins had on their roster was the offensive line. Early on, they signed another Cowboy, offensive guard Connor Williams. So solid upgrade over what the Dolphins had on their roster. And then they went into more of a lull, signed a lot of their own free agents, mostly on the defensive side, a bunch of linebackers who were probably more special teams, backup, part-time starter types. But then they went back in and they signed Raheem Mostert, who McDaniel's obviously familiar with from his 49ers days. And if he can stay healthy, he is one heck of a running back. But that's a big if with him. He's had injuries the last couple of years. And, they signed Teddy Bridgewater, which I think we discussed that a few episodes ago. Solid. Spent a lot of money for a backup quarterback. But, if Tua gets hurt, they get a solid backup to bring in. So after all this was happening, Dolphin fans are going, 2-3 weeks into free agency, and you haven't really improved the offensive line that much. Williams with a nice signing, but other than Robert Hunt, he was the only lockdown starter the Dolphins had. And then you had the boom. They signed Terran Armstead from the Saints. Another guy has had a little bit of injury problems, but he's one of the best left tackles in the NFL. Tremendous upgrade. I mean, the Dolphins' offensive line for years and years has been horrendous. And it's one of the reasons you couldn't really hold Tua that accountable the last couple of years, because he was always under pressure and never had a rushing game. And so the Dolphins, I think, spent their money fairly wisely. And then you had the wow part from my article. Armstead was the boom. The wow was out of the blue. They traded for Tyrikill. Now, my initial reaction was, you gave up, 5 draft picks, and you paid him $30 million a year? Whew, that's a big chunk of change. Man, here's Tyreek Hill. And now you got like a track team out there with Hill and Waddle and Cedric Wilson and Mostert and Edmonds. Those guys all can fly. And I'm just hoping McDaniels is as creative an offensive coach as he has been built up to be. Sort of reminds me of the Adam Gase hiring many years ago. It said this guy's an offensive genius, and he was just terrible. But I don't think that's the case with McDaniel. So I'm very bullish on the Dolphins' chances right now. They still got some question marks on the offensive line still. So hopefully some of those high draft picks the last few years finally pan out, and maybe McDaniel and his new O-line coach know how to get them to block better. So that's my quick overview of my Dolphin off season. I'd give it on a scale of 1 to 10. I'd probably give it like a 8.5.
Okay. All right, Steve, I'm going to go ahead. And what we're going to do is talk about some of the key names out here. They retained defensive end Emmanuel Ogbah to a 4-year deal. Any thoughts about that, Steve?
Yeah, I thought that was a great re-signing for them because, seeing him I see him at least twice a year, when they play New England. But a lot of Dolphins games get broadcast down here, so I've seen them quite a bit. And I think he's, like Greg was saying, I think he's a great, re-signing. I think he's a great piece of that defense. He can do it all. I really like him as a football player. I think that was a great re-signing for them. And, before he got to free agency, like he said, I mean, on the surface, you say, wow, $15 million. But nowadays, that's dropping the bucket. I mean, like you said, Tyrikill's getting double that.
Right.
So I thought it was a great re-signing for them, and I think it was a smart move too.
I think the key that people have to understand out here is it's always important to retain your own players. You got a good player, keep them in your system. I don't care what sport you're at. The good teams obviously retain their own players and they draft well. The bad teams that lose year in and year out, they don't make it to the second contract or extension. So, yeah, I think the move for Emmanuel Ogbah is pretty sound. Rick, any thoughts about Emmanuel?
I agree with all three of you guys. They had to resign what they have. They have a new head coach now. They're trying to move on from Flores, and they just had to retain people. They had to get people. So getting one of their best players to resign was a good thing for them.
All right, Greg, anything you want to add to Emmanuel Ogbah before we go on to the next player?
My only concern about the Dolphins offseason so far has been they obviously brought back Ogbah. They restructured Xavier Howard's contract. But other than that, they have the exact same defense back as they had last year, and they had a pretty good defense, especially second half of the season. They could have used like a middle linebacker. They still could use an extra cornerback. Maybe they addressed those needs in the draft, but they don't have a first or second round pick. So I was hoping they'd build up the defense a little bit, but they still should be solid. And you know what makes a defense better is a good offense. And the offense should be light years better than last year.
That sounds good. All right, let's go to the next key acquisition that I took note of. Cardinals running back Chase Edmonds gets 3 years. You know what? Again, you need to bolster that running attack. And I like the move with Chase Edmonds. I really do. So, Steve, again, I'm going to go back to you. Chase Edmonds is a guy that I don't think Patriot fans want to see twice a year, but they're going to have to see him anyways.
Well, they'll see him twice a year now. But, I've watched him, and I like his game because he's a good runner. He's a good pass receiver out of the backfield. And now with the guys that they've added, plus the guys they already had on offense, there should be a lot of really open space for him to work. You got guys like Hill and Waddle going to stretch that opposing defense out. And guys like Edmonds who can catch the ball out of the backfield. Mostert, I know we'll get to him shortly. But
right.
I think that he should find himself. I know he hasn't been a big average guy when it comes to, yards per reception. I think that's going to increase this year.
Rick?
Yeah, they haven't had a running game. That's one of the things about the Dolphins. The running game hasn't been good. They had Ricky Williams, but that was a while ago. And so they need to do something. They need to get some more opportunities for Tua. Poor guy. He's just been under attack, and he's done a pretty good job for the little help that he's gotten. So they definitely had to do something with running, And so they should be much, much better in the running game.
Well, I mean, I can tell that Edmonds didn't fit into the scheme when you have James Conner. Obviously, he's done a really good job with the Cardinals, so therefore it made Chase Edmonds expendable. Greg, anything else you want to add before we go to the next guy?
No, I like Edmonds. I mean, he's not someone who's going to carry the ball 25 times a game, but I think between receptions and carrying the ball, he's going to get 10 to 15 touches a week, which is what he's built for.
All right, well, tell you what, we're going to go to Big D, and at least this guy was smart enough going from one place that didn't have state income tax to another. Wide receiver Cedric Wilson gets 3 years with the Fish from the Dallas Cowboys. So, Greg, we're going to let you lead off and give us a little bit more insight about Cedric Wilson joining the Miami Dolphins.
Yeah, I got to admit, prior to last season, I did not know a whole lot about Cedric Wilson, but the Cowboys are always on TV, so you get familiar with their players. And all their receivers were injured at some point last year. So he got a lot of playing time. And I was impressed with him. Not as like a number one wide receiver on a team, but for the Dolphins, he's going to be the number 3 receiver. He's 6'3", so he's going to be their biggest wide receiver. He's also fast. So I think he is a great addition to the team. And compared to Christian Kirk, he only costs $7.5 million a year. And I think I'd rather have Wilson instead of Kirk, regardless of what the salaries are.
Rick?
Yeah, I mean, they had it. Like I said, they have a new head coach. They had to make some acquisitions. I always love to see someone leave the Cowboys. It always puts a smile on my face. I'm not a Cowboy fan at all. It's always good to see someone go there, get an opportunity somewhere else. With Miami, and Miami looks like a team that's on the up. They got a very interesting, dynamic coach. A really offensive-minded coach. So like I said, it's always good to see someone from the Cowboys leave. I'm intrigued to see what the Dolphins do, but I like what they have done so far.
Steve?
Yeah, I like Wilson. Again, you're talking about a number 3 wide receiver. I mean, guy that catches passes for 600 yards, 6 touchdowns last year. I think that's plenty good for a third wide receiver. And again, with Hill and Waddle, he's going to see a lot of, subpar defensive backs guarding him. I think him and Mike Gesicki are going to have big years this year because of the other 2 guys.
Yeah, I mean, again, you're talking about a guy that obviously, did a pretty decent job at the Dallas Cowboys with Dak Prescott, and now obviously he'll be catching passes from 2, obviously a little different situation. I love the analogy to how you brought up Adam Gase and Mike McDaniel. We'll get to that in a little while, but we all know that Adam Gase came to Miami as a strong offensive mind, but didn't quite work out that way. So, but we'll stay with Big D and the fact that the Miami Dolphins added guard Connor Williams for 2 years. Greg, since you wrote the article, we're going to lead off with you on all these players and give us the overview on Williams.
Yeah, I mean, it's always tough to follow an offensive lineman because, the camera is usually focused on the skill players. But he was a starter for Dallas for most of the last 4 years. Now, he did get benched at one point last year because he was having too many penalties. But that was sort of an anomaly for him. I mean, McDaniels is supposed to be very good in the run game, how to coach offensive linemen. He brought in a new offensive line coach. So I'm posting, already expect him to be a significant upgrade over what they used last year. And if he isn't, I'll be really disappointed because the Dolphins need to improve their offensive line.
All right, well, Rick, let's go back to the Rick Curti category, Mr. Opinion. Another guy leaves the Cowboys, and this one comes back to the Fish. So why don't you continue your little I hate Cowboys conversation, Rick?
Well, like I said, I love it when someone leaves the Cowboys, and like I said, the Dolphins are trying to make a big splash. They got a very, like I said, we mentioned him as Adam Gase. He kind of reminds me more of a Mark Trestman, kind of like this offensive-minded guru guy. Hopefully he has a little bit of success in Trestman in the NFL. Hopefully he can be like the Trestman in the CFL where he won a couple Grey Cups. So nevertheless, it was a good signing. Like I said, Dolphins got to make a big splash. Jaguars, made a big splash when they got their new head coach and everything. And so they're just it should be an interesting year for them. I expect them to be a much better team and make the playoffs.
Okay, Steve, talk about Connor Williams.
Yeah, he was like a star. I want to say a starter for at least 3 or 4 years, and he's only 25. That's huge. He's still a young guy, so the interior of the line is so important. I mean, it gets overlooked a lot because everyone wants to talk about tackles and the edge rusher guys, but if the interior of your line isn't solid, the quarterback is not able to step up. Those edge guys, they come around the edge, but they can bring pressure from the outside. But if the quarterback's able to step up, it makes a huge amount of difference. And that's been an area that the Dolphins have suffered with for quite some time. And I think he's going to be a solid addition. And like Greg said, last year was kind of an anomaly. They flagged him an awful lot last year, but I don't expect that's going to continue.
Yeah, I mean, I got to tell you a crazy analogy, and that really amazed me many years ago. I went to the 1982 Final Four, and I saw North Carolina beat Georgetown. And, I really am proud of the fact that I went there, took a Greyhound bus. It took me 20 some hours to go with a friend of mine locally. And you ever heard of a guy by the name of Patrick Ewing?
Yeah, I think so.
I've heard of him.
Yeah. Yeah. Once upon a time, a guy by the name of Patrick Ewing, used to get nailed for a lot of goaltending calls. You ever remember that name? And I'll never forget that he was getting more goaltending calls than you can only imagine. And John Thompson didn't care because he wasn't going to go ahead and let his prize center go ahead and take away from his aggressive nature. Why am I bringing that up here? It's appropriate. All right. So Connor obviously got hit with the yellow hanky a little bit more, but you never want to take away a guy's tenacity and aggressiveness with the intent that he's trying to make a positive contribution. And I now know that John Thompson never got on Patrick Ewing, and hopefully Connor Williams gets it figured out as well. I just thought it was just something interesting. I can certainly talk about going to the Final Four, the greatest Final Four ever with Michael Jordan and so forth. But Patrick Ewing was a wild card, and you talk about over aggressiveness. All right, now the one topic I know that I've been looking forward to getting to is we talked about this before. Now we have an opportunity to focus on it a little bit more detail today. Is Teddy Bridgewater being the backup? So we think, right? Okay, but we'll break down the gist of the deal. $6.5 million guaranteed, $3.5 million incentives. That seems like an awful lot of money for a so-called backup. Or you ever heard of the term called short leash? Okay, Greg Fuchs, take it from there.
I'm trying to understand it myself also. The rationale in my mind is Tua has always been a little injury prone. And you can't afford to have your team just go down the toilet if your starting quarterback gets injured. So they got a solid backup quarterback. And I think that's what Bridgewater is. He's had plenty of opportunities to start, and he's been a marginal starter. And I think Tua is going to get a long leash, okay? Because I think he has much more upside than Bridgewater is. So even if he throws 5 interceptions in his first 2 games, he's still starting game 3, he's still starting game 4. I think he's got a lot more upside than Bridgewater. And I think the only way Teddy gets on the field is if Tua gets injured.
Well, the fact of the matter is they're still paying a lot of money, $10 million. The one thing that intrigues me as you brought that up is I know when Aaron Rodgers got hurt a while back, Packers season went down pretty quickly. And to think he would be upset with Jordan Love, I understand the heir apparent thing would make a quarterback nervous, but you really do have to have 2 good quarterbacks. And I think Aaron Rodgers has gotten used to the fact that Jordan Love is around. Let's not kid yourself. God forbid something happens to Aaron Rodgers and Jordan Love is efficient. Then there's no question that you need another one. I think one thing, since we're in the Miami area, and Greg probably knows it better than anybody else, we know when the Dolphins had their perfect season when Bob Greasy went down, we all know that Earl Morrall is a major reason that they had that undefeated season as well. Now, am I trying to incorporate anything along those lines of this? No, but let's not kid ourselves. You do need to have 2 excellent quarterbacks. And for you Dolphin fans that are watching and listening to the show, go back to Earl Morrall, Bob Greasy, and Don Shula, and you have to have at least a couple. And remember, I know that perfect season looms large in these parts. So with that said, okay, Rick Curti, give me your observations about the Teddy Bridgewater acquisition?
Oh, I loved it. I've been a big Bridgewater fan. He was in Carolina for only a season. To me, didn't get the opportunity that they have. And look at the mess that the Panthers are now. He was in Denver. He did okay. I mean, he kind of struggled a little bit, but Denver, their offense was not very good to begin with. So I think it's a good start for him. They're paying him a lot of money to be a backup because Tua's just hurt a lot. That's just the bottom line with Tua. So in case he gets hurt a lot, they got a good, solid starting backup quarterback who's got experience as a starting quarterback. And so he's just like a plan B just in case Tua gets hurt or he starts struggling. They can put Bridgewater in. So it was a great acquisition. It's a lot of money, but hey, they had to do it.
Steve?
Yeah, I thought it was another really good signing on Miami's part. As Greg wrote in his article, I mean, Tua's been hurt a lot, and he's kind of injury prone. So you have to have somebody there that can take over, especially with the acquisitions that they've made. Because Miami should be in the hunt for a playoff berth, no questions asked this year. But I think the other thing is, I still not sure that the Dolphins' brain trust is fully, believing in Tua. I think, as Greg says, he believes that he's going to have a long leash. I think that'll go to about 8 games. If that offense isn't clicking by game 8, I think they'd make a change, and then they're going to look for a new franchise quarterback. So it's a win on both sides. I mean, Teddy's getting a big payday, and if he has to hold a clipboard for $10 million, there are worse things to do in life than to make $10 million holding a clipboard, right? So, but Miami protected themselves, and now they have a really good backup quarterback. I think I've always been a Teddy Bridgewater fan. I thought he had a good year in Denver last year. It's just the surrounding cast wasn't the greatest.
Yeah, Steve, you said a mouthful there. You really did. And you know what? You said a really good mouthful there. I agree with you. I think about 8 games, and then you determine what you really have. So, and you're paying him $10 million, so there's nothing wrong with having a guy that, that is capable. Let's not forget his body of work in Minnesota and the fact that he obviously had a pretty good time in New Orleans as well when I think Drew Brees went down. So I think you've got something to work with Ted Brees. I think it was probably one of Miami's better signings during the offseason.
Well, and then, like I said, I mean, you look now, they have Waddle, Hill, Gesicki, Wilson, Mostert, Chase Edmonds. I mean, come on. There's no excuse for Tua now. They got him a couple of good offensive linemen. There's zero excuse now. They've surrounded him with really good talent. As Greg said in the article, they have a track team now. Those guys can all fly. So I think, it might take 2 or 3 games because you have so many new pieces. You can't expect them to come out in week 1 and score 55 points. Maybe they will. But, you can't expect it all to be clicking on week 1. It's going to take 2 or 3 weeks. So, if the offense isn't quite clicking yet, the guys have to find their chemistry. They have to find their role. But I think that, they've made some great acquisitions this year.
The amazing part about all of this, though, do we tend to forget that the Dolphins, they start 1-7 and ended up winning, 9 games? And obviously, I don't expect them to get off to that kind of a slow start. But when you talk about 17-game season and how horrible they started and how strong they finished, even though Brian Flores lost his job as a result, that's not the point, okay? So a lot of things can happen during that 17 weeks as well, and let alone the bye week. So I know that there's a lot of interesting angles here. And I think that I'm going to reiterate what I just said moments ago, that the Teddy Bridgewater signing is one of Miami's better moves. All right, Steve, you alluded to this before, and now we're going to get to it, okay? That Raheem Mostert, very familiar with Mike McDaniel, was added for former 49ers running back. So with that, Steve, you let the cat out of the bag earlier with it. So why don't you go ahead and pat the cat on the back and talk about the fact that it's a 1-year deal. Obviously, the key to Mostert will be his health.
Yeah, I mean, he's only played in, I think, 9 games in the past 2 years. but when he's healthy, as Greg put it in the article, I keep mentioning it. It was a great piece, by the way, Greg. Coming from a non-Dolphins fan as well. But, I mean, when he's healthy, he can fly. And he brings that dimension of speed from the backfield. I think, for a 1-year deal, I think it's a really good signing, because it's kind of a prove it deal. Can you stay healthy?
Right.
For the season. They did bring in Edmonds to back him up. So I think that's a really good move on their part. I like Mostert, but again, it comes with that caveat. I mean, if he can stay healthy for at least 12 or 15 games.
Well, the key that you said, Steve, it's a prove-it deal, and he comes from the 49ers. And where did Mike McDaniel come from? The 49ers. So if anybody knows what the guy
he knows
can do.
what he can do.
Right. Yeah. Mike McDaniel can. So, all right, Rick, pick it up from there.
Yeah, like I said, like guys said, Dolphins are just trying to turn that page from Flores. They got this great offensive-minded head coach. They're just trying to make a big splash. I like what they've been doing. I think the Bridgewater one was the best in my opinion, but they have to have some other interior pieces to help him, with the offensive line. They have to revamp that and the running game and the defense. So I like I said, I'll be surprised if the Dolphins don't make the playoffs, So, and I don't see them starting off like 1-7 like they did last year. That was just a weird thing, and to win all those games in a row. So I like what they're doing. They're looking really good, really solid. We'll see what McDaniel does. I'm intrigued to see what he does because he's this offensive-minded genius guy. He kind of reminds, like I said, Mark Trestman more than Adam Gase. So hopefully he'll do much better than Trestman did with the Bears. But I like what Dolphins look good.
All right, so Greg, why don't you summarize Raheem Mostert?
Yeah, we're watching him the past several seasons with San Francisco. I just loved him. Extremely fast, a home run hitter, a fairly tough guy too. But I always wonder when a running back is that good, and you can say that about a lot of running backs, how much of it is him and how much of it is the offensive line? I mean, look at Ezekiel Elliott the last few years. He has not been the same player the last few years. Some of it might be some nagging injuries, but the Cowboys' offensive line is nowhere near as good as it was 3-4 years ago. So is he going to be able to run behind a decent offensive line in Miami? To be determined.
All right, well, with that said, let's segue the fact that the Dolphins added left tackle Tyrion Armstead for a 5-year deal. You talk about setting you up real well, Greg. We're going to do exactly that. 5 years for Tyrion Armstead. Take it away.
Yeah, a lot of money. But some people in the NFL had him as the number one free agent in all the NFL this year, regardless of position. Yeah, he's had some injury issues the past few years. Well, seems like you can say that about almost everybody in the NFL these days. But he's an absolute stud. He's going to help with the pass protection. He's going to help with the run game. Supposed to be a good leader and locker room guy. And he's easily the Dolphins' best offensive lineman. And him and Williams should be lining up on the left side of that line. So I would expect a lot of runs to the left side when the Dolphins play.
Okay, Rick?
Yeah, I mean, he was a big, no pun intended, big fish they got, so hopefully they can, if he can stay healthy, they're going to look great. They've vastly improved in that position. They had to get a big name, a big, like Greg said, a stud. He's a big stud. Hopefully he can stay healthy. And if he can, they'll be a much, much more improved. So he's a great acquisition. They needed, like I said, they need to make a big splash. He's it. And to say he was the number one and the Dolphins got him, that's saying a lot. So it was a great acquisition by the Dolphins.
Well, the biggest thing we have to understand is you got a 5-year contract. If anybody's going to get a 5-year contract, what does that say, Steve Balestrieri, about Tyrion Armstead?
Well, he's going to be 31 this year. He still has a lot of football left in him if he can stay healthy. He's a tremendous left tackle. And I thought that even including the Hill trade, I think that was their best move. I really do. Because that's been their Achilles heel is the offensive line. Now they have one of the better left tackles in the game. I think he made 3 or 4 Pro Bowls with the Saints. And, their rookie, I'm trying to remember, is it Eichenberger?
Eichenberg, yeah.
Yeah, Eichenberg. I'm sorry. Yeah, he struggled a little bit last year, as rookies will, but now they can move him over to the right-hand side. And I think this was a great signing for Miami. And again, this is coming from a non-Miami fan. So, no, I think he's outstanding. The caveat with him, the last couple of years, he's missed a lot of time with various injuries. So, if he can stay healthy, I mean, they gave him $87 million if he meets all his incentives. So 5 years, $87 million. They expect him to be around for a while.
All right, well, let's segue to the last big thing we're going to talk about. I know we've been dancing around the whole thing. So we're going to talk about Kansas City Chiefs superstar Tyrikill. Gave up 5 draft choices, first and a second in 2022. He has 4 years, $120 million. So extension, what can I say? All right, Greg, since you've been riding this train all along, let's talk about Tyrikill. And then what I'm going to do after you do that, because I have a couple of categories, I want to lump a few things before we call it a night. So with that said, take it away, Greg. Let's talk about Tyrikill.
I think we all share the same opinion about Tyrikill, at least when he was in Kansas City's offense. Maybe the most explosive wide receiver in the NFL. He can turn a 5-yard pass into a 50-yard touchdown. He can take the end arounds and bust them for 10, 20, 30 yards. Can take the ball deep. I mean, he is just an electric player. Of course, that leads to the obvious question. How's he going to do without Patrick Mahomes throwing him the ball? Because Tua is not Mahomes, okay? But Tua probably go with more shorter passes. Tua is accurate. I mean, the Dolphins' run game may be better than the Chiefs' run game, I'm hoping. And he's unlike in Kansas City. I mean, Kansas City's offense was Hill and Kelsey for the most part. Dolphins are a little more diverse. We've talked about all the offensive players they've added this year, so it's not like Tyreek Hill's going to be getting the ball 40% of the time like he was in Kansas City. So his stats may not be as good as he was in Kansas City, but his impact on the Dolphins' offense should be just as impactful.
Rick?
I love getting Hill. I was really surprised when Kansas City traded him. It was like, and he's going to the Dolphins. Kansas City got a boatload for him, but to me it was worth it because they really needed something there. They needed a home run hitter there, and Hill's probably like one of the best wide receivers in the NFL. Like Greg said, the question is Tua. His arm strength is nowhere near Patrick Mahomes. I don't think anybody's is. Maybe with Josh Allen. So it'll be interesting to see how that works out. I hope he does really well. But they needed. This is a grand slam that they had to do, and they did it. They gave up a lot. I know they did, but they had to get something because they haven't had a dynamic wide receiver in a very, very long time. So good for them for doing it. They gave up a lot, but we'll just see what happens with him and Tua, because Tua doesn't have that arm strength like Mahomes.
All right, Steve.
Yeah, I'm not buying into that whole arm strength thing. I mean, McDaniels, I mean, he knows his personnel. So I think they're going to get creative, and they're going to stretch the heck out of the field horizontally. I see a ton of crossing routes, rub routes, bunch formations. With all that speed, it doesn't matter where you get your playmakers the football, as long as they get it in space. If they catch the ball in space, then it's 6 points. So I'm not, I know everyone's been harping on that, and I see it on social media all the time. Oh, how's Tua going to throw the football? Well, he's going to throw, 5 to 15-yard passes. But if they get creative with stretching the field horizontally, then they're going to be extremely successful. And, it doesn't matter. I mean, when it comes to that deep route, yeah, he doesn't have the arm strength of Mahomes. And like Rick said, I don't know if anybody else does either. But if you get that initial separation with these guys, all he has to do is lob it over that cornerback's head. So 10-yard passes will go to the house. So I think, I'm on board. I think Hill's going to have a very impactful season. And like Greg said, you have so many weapons. His stats might not be as high as they were in Kansas City, but you're talking about him, Waddle, Wilson, Gesicki. Everyone's forgetting about Gesicki. I think he's a tremendous tight end. And I think, like I said, I believe him and Wilson are really going to benefit from having those other guys on the field. So I think the Dolphins' offense is going to be in really good shape this year.
The only thing I'll say about Tyrikill, another lifetime ago when I played fantasy football with my in-laws, is my sister-in-law Marie had this guy. She doesn't know nothing about football, but they had those automatic selection of the teams, and she got this guy. And I dreaded playing her because I was going to get my tail kicked. She don't know nothing about football. I know everything about football, and I was getting smoked because of Tyrikill. What do I need to know except fantasy football, which is why I did win a championship in a couple leagues, including that one year. And then after a couple of years where I felt this fantasy stuff isn't up my bag, Tyrikill was a first-class nightmare, but Miami Dolphins don't want to care about me and my fantasy football, and my sister-in-law stomping me. But all I can say is you're getting a good player, so...
Since you brought up fantasy and Steve brought up Gesicki, I'd be curious as to your guys' take on Gesicki because in fantasy, he's obviously a tight end. In real football, he is not. 80% of his snaps last year, he's lined up in the slot or out wide. I mean, he's just a tight end body playing a wide receiver, okay? And one of the things that concerned me, one of the first things McDaniel said is, I need a tight end who blocks. The next block Gesicki throws will be his first.
Yeah.
So,
Kelsey hasn't thrown many either. So
I'm just curious as to how he will fit in, especially since McDaniel likes to run the ball.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I think another thing you have to think about nowadays, the way people are paying these players, are you paying them as wide receivers, tight ends, running backs? And then you wonder about the pay scale. That'll be for another day or another time. But, a lot of guys think, well, hey, wide receivers get more money. I want to get paid like a wide receiver and not a running back. And, but I'm not getting into that because I want to make sure we stay on track. But that's something a lot of folks would think about. So, with that said, I have a category called the Envision category. And what do I mean by the Envision category? We're going to break it down, by a couple of categories. But before I do that, when we talk about the logjam at wide receiver, let us not forget that Devontae Parker was shipped to New England. Okay, so obviously Belichick and Mac Jones has another weapon out there. So I know we talked about this before, but we're going to address it again. Steve, what are your thoughts about the fact that the Dolphins traded Devontae Parker to a divisional opponent?
Well, and I think we talked about it on this show a couple of weeks ago when the deal came through. At first my eyebrows went up, but, when you look at it from a practical standpoint, the Dolphins took the best deal that was on the table.
Right.
The Patriots offered more than any of the other teams were offering them for Parker. So they took the best deal that was there. I think it's a win for both teams. The Patriots really covet that big physical wide receiver that can contest, that make contested catches, That was why they drafted N'Keal Harry. He hasn't worked out. So now they have Parker. And, the Dolphins got a third-round pick in return for next year, which will help them in their draft next year. And the Patriots got Parker in a fifth this year. So I think it was a win for both teams. I think Parker is going to fit in well with Mac Jones. They've been working out together, and they were working out in Florida prior to OTA starting. And, Parker spoke to the media today, I believe it was. And he said him and Mac Jones are already, trying to get some chemistry down.
Well, I think a lot of things that we all know we can agree on are, number one, we know that Mike McDaniel is an offensive guru, which is why they brought him in here in the first place, and that the team is loaded. And I think we all can agree that this is a make or break year for Tua as well. I mean, let's face reality, a few years into the system, now you surrounded him with an offensive-minded coach. But don't you guys agree that those are some of the things that definitely we're looking at for 2022 with the Miami Dolphins? Steve? Go ahead, Steve.
Yeah, I do. I mean, like I said, they surrounded him with really good quality football players. So, I mean, they're stacked on offense right now. They should be, by the end of the season, that should be an offensive juggernaut if everyone can stay healthy.
Rick?
Yeah, there's no more excuses for Tua. Before he didn't have the weapons, he didn't have the offensive line. He was getting crushed down there. He was getting crushed with injuries and stuff like that. Now there's no more excuses for him. You got a great wide receiver. You bolstered everything up. You re-signed your key acquisitions. So no more excuses for Tua. He needs to perform well. If he gets injured again, I mean, they got Bridgewater there, but if he does struggle and he's not doing it, I wouldn't be surprised if Miami tries to get a quarterback in next year's draft or try to trade for one. Tua is a great college quarterback, but in the pros, it's just a big question mark. And one of them is he just can't stay healthy. So there's a lot of Tua we haven't seen yet, but they should be much, much more improved.
Before I go to Greg, though, I will say that Stephen Ross is certainly not afraid of the splash signing for a lot of Detroit fans that might be looking at here. Once upon a time, and Ndamukong Suh got lured down here, and they paid him a boatload of money. Obviously, Suh didn't stay around more than a couple of years. But Stephen Ross isn't afraid to spend big money on players, especially if they're big names and their marquee appeal, because they all know that they like to put rear ends in the stand. So with that said, Greg Fuchs, take it from there. We obviously unpacked, and I want to get back to my envision category before we call it a night.
Yeah. Well, I'm just hoping McDaniel is half as good as people say he is. And it's not all about play calling. He has to control the locker room. He's got to have all 51 players impressed with him. But I am very optimistic based on what I have read. Dolphins still have two huge question marks on the offensive line at center and right tackle. I mean, they used a second-round pick on Eichenberg last year, and as Steve mentioned, he didn't play all that well. He has got to definitely up his game this year. He's protecting to his backside. And back to Devontae Parker, Dolphin fans always had a love-hate relationship with him. When healthy, he is an outstanding player. Patriot fans, they're going to see him make some catches this year and go, wow, I didn't realize Parker was that good. He is damn good if he's on the field.
All right. Well, obviously, Greg, it's safe to say that, this is a make or break year for Tua, though, isn't it, Greg?
It certainly is. All depends what they ask him to do. If they're asking him to throw 40, 50-yard passes downfield to his wide receivers, I don't think that's his game. He'll do it occasionally. I think, as either Rick or Steve said, it's going to be mostly the running game and a lot of 5, 10, 15, 20-yard passes, and let those playmakers make plays.
All right, well, now on to the envision category. Wide receivers, well, here you have it. Tyrikill, Jalen Waddle, Cedric Wilson. Steve, how would you size up that group?
Oh, I think they're a dynamic group. I mean, you have all kinds of speed out there. You have playmakers. So I think that this is one of the better groups in the NFL right now.
Rick?
Yeah, I agree. It's like a three-headed monster. They're both great. They're young. They're in their prime. They should be they're much, much more improved now. They should be an offensive juggernaut during the middle to the end of the season. They should be putting up some big old points. And so all three of them together, they're dynamic.
And Greg?
I think it's one of the best receiving groups in the NFL. One of the questions is who's going to step up as the number 4 receiver, because I can guarantee you one of those 3 guys is going to get injured, even if it's just for a game or two. Lynn Bowden is probably their number 4 wide receiver right now. He missed all of last year, but I liked what I saw of him in his rookie season. He's sort of a Debo Samuel gadget guy because he was a running back, quarterback receiver in college. So I'm somewhat optimistic about him as a number 4 wide receiver. If those other 3 stay healthy, though, you won't see him on the field a whole lot.
Well, what's interesting about this threesome, Cedric Wilson, obviously, they pick him up from the Cowboys. You draft Jalen Waddle, so obviously from Alabama, so Tua is familiarity there. And what do I have to say? My favorite fantasy football nightmare, Tyreek Hill, came with a big price. But then again, if the Dolphins are like the Rams, they don't care about draft choices. We also, the Rams get rid of a lot of draft choices, won a Super Bowl. I don't know if the Dolphins are there yet. So each of these three players came from different ways to make their way down to South Beach. And finally, we'll go to the running back group: Chase Edmonds, Raheem Mostert. I know we've already talked about it. Chase Edmonds traded the desert for South Beach, and everybody's hoping that Raheem Mostert goes from being the San Francisco treat to the Miami treat. Yes, there are some analogies and cliches that I can throw out there. I said my piece. Rick, so let's talk about these two running backs.
Well, during my day, having the Barry Sanders and Eric Dickerson, those days are over. Now it's a 2-3-headed running back system. I think they're going to be well. I think all three of them are going to all together do well because they're not like the fantastic, but they're still very, very good. And I think with three of them together, and you don't have to worry about getting big plays. You don't have to worry about them getting a lot of carries or anything like that. They'll be dividing that with all three of them. So I think they'll do very, very well.
Yeah, I think that the key with Edmonds and Mostert is just be efficient, right, Steve? That's all you need. You don't need anybody. If you can find 1,000-yard rusher nowadays, though, what does it take to get to 1,000 yards compared to what the number used to be? Well, we won't get me started there. That might be another show down the road after I get Greg Fuchs to write an article like he always does anyways when I tell him to. But, we devalue the 1,000-yard rusher. But I think the thing is with Chase Edmonds and Raheem Mostert is they just have to be efficient so that you are able to use the wideouts, right, Steve?
Yeah, I mean, the running game should be key for the Dolphins this year because now they have speed back there.
Right.
And I think that, with those two guys, again, it all depends on health. But if you can mix those two guys up, because, every place nowadays in the NFL, it's running back by committee.
Right.
You have two guys that can run the rock. You have a third down back that comes in for passing downs, pass protection. So, that's what the NFL's coming to. And so that 1,000-yard rusher isn't necessarily a must-have. If you have guys that are going to be, as you said, efficient, they run the ball, they hit the hole quickly, they get to that second level, they stress the defense out. And, if you get those linebackers leaning in, as we all know, then that opens up play action. And with the speed they have in wide receivers, this should be a really fun offense to watch this year. And I think a lot of it will come, the running backs will definitely benefit from that.
Yeah. Yeah, I think the running back position, I think we can all agree on this, is that it's really been devalued because of the focal point, obviously, and the aerial attacks. I think it really has been. I mean, I don't see Ezekiel Elliott lighting it up in Dallas. I mean, and he's getting paid.
Barkley either.
Who?
Barkley, Saquon Barkley.
Oh,
he can't stay healthy. He can't stay healthy if his life depended on it.
Well, the short passing game in the NFL is a lot like handoffs used to be. I mean, you make those quick 2-3 yard throws, you gain 4 or 5 yards. It's just like the old Packer sweep from the 60s. It's just like a long handoff. Yeah. So that's why running backs have kind of been devalued a little bit. But you still have to have the running game. You can't be one-dimensional. If you have a complementary running game in the NFL today, then you're going to be tough to stop.
Well, I know when I was covering the Lions years ago, I often wondered, and it was just a wonder, what Barry Sanders would be like if he was catching the ball out of the backfield. We all knew what he did when he ran the football. He threw more ACLs than anybody else on the planet trying to chase him down and all that. But even if he could be a pass receiver, it makes you wonder. But then again, folks, okay, we can always wonder if we want to about Barry Sanders, about what would have been. It's safe to say he was the first ballot Hall of Famer, and to me, he's the greatest running back of all time.
I used to always think the same thing because I loved watching him play.
Yeah.
And, I always wondered, if you took Barry Sanders and plugged him in with the 49ers of that era or Dallas after that, I mean, boy, he would have lit it up.
Oh, yeah.
1,800-yard seasons. Yeah, now everybody's like a screen passer. You got little screens here and there, sort of like the Marshall Faulk type. That's like the running game now. You have to be like 2-3 dimensional now. The running the ball down there. The only one that's great at that is Henry. All the, he's like he reminds me of Earl Campbell, the old running backs. Other than that, it's all screen passes, bubble
Right.
passes, all that stuff.
Yeah, I like the Derrick Henry, Earl Campbell comparison.
Yeah, he just bludgeons people when
he's just strong. He's like an ox down there. He's he's like a true old-fashioned running back, and I just see so much of Earl Campbell in him.
Yeah, the only thing I hope I don't see with Earl Campbell and Derrick Henry is he's not in a wheelchair and a walker. Other than that, because obviously we know what happened there. All right, Greg, you get the last word in terms of running backs, and we're going to call it a night.
My one thing on running backs is, it's a position just waiting to get injured. And Mostert and Edmonds, to a lesser degree, have a bit of an injury history. Dolphins' third running back right now is Myles Gaskin, who's okay. Dolphins have a third and fourth round pick in this year's draft. There's a lot of good running backs in the NFL who were drafted in the third or fourth round. I would use one of those two picks on a running back.
Fair enough. Okay, well, just so you know, folks, this is a Sports Exchange. My name is Scott Morganroth, Motor City Madmouth. You can hear these broadcasts on iHeartRadio, so go ahead and look up the Sports Exchange on iHeartRadio. Subscribe, so wherever you're at, you can always listen to it there. You can also find them on our YouTube channel, South Florida Tribune YouTube channel. Hit the subscribe button. You get all the notifications that you need. And, of course, you can find it on our website, www.southfloridatribune.com. We're going to have another broadcast on Monday night. Greg Fuchs, in a moment, will preview it as we get closer to the draft. In fact, why don't you do that right now, Greg? You wrote another article. Let our fans out there know what we're going to be talking about Monday night with the same crew and then some.
Yeah, I wrote an article the other day about what the Dolphins should do in the draft. And for the past several seasons, it's been an exciting exercise because they had a plethora of draft picks. But with the Tyrikill trade, they only have 4 picks this year, a third and fourth and 2 sevenths. So they're probably in, draft the best player left on your draft board, which is a nice position to be in because the Dolphins have always been reaching based on need in years past. So we'll touch on that, and I'm guessing we might touch on some non-Dolphin draft stuff because I have another draft article in the queue.
Well, very good. Well, I look forward to seeing it. So with that said, folks, I have something to look forward to on Monday night. All right, with that said, Greg, I'll let everybody know how they can get a hold of you.
Well, I write for www.southfloridatribune.com. That's where you can find all my articles. And you can follow me on Twitter at GFuchs at Gregory Fuchs.
Right?
You can find me on my website at www.charlottebats.com. I'm also on Facebook at MLB Charlotte. I'm also on there, Charlotte Bats Baseball. I'm also on Twitter, Charlotte Bats Baseball. I'm on Instagram at Charlotte Bats. And I'm also on Instagram under Rick Curti, Curti. And our email address is cltbatsbaseball@gmail.com. And go on our website and you can sign our petition to bring Major League Baseball to Charlotte, North Carolina.
And I should also point out that Rick Curti does a wonderful job helping us on social media. And he's also the co-host on 108 Inches Baseball Talk. That show has some great people on it. Got Lou Landers, Rick Curti, Eric Katz. They all do a fine job. I'm included on the broadcast as well. So if you have an opportunity to listen to 108 Stitches Baseball Talk, and you get a lot of great stuff as well. So, all right, Mr. Patriot, let everybody know how they can get a hold of you. Mr. Patriot, military, the jack of all trades, and master of them all. We got some good stuff lined up.
Master of none. That's it. That's Hey, you can find me on Twitter at SteveB7SFG. I'm on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn under Steve Balestrieri. I write for PatsFans.com. I do a podcast with them called Patriots 4th and 2. And I'm also a national security columnist for 1945.com. And as you all have seen on the news, Ukraine has been keeping me really busy with that side of my work.
I can only imagine. Well, a lot of people tend to accuse me of talking too fast, and I definitely probably do. So if I give all the other information a little quick, you can find the shows on iHeartRadio. So go ahead and subscribe to us there, the Sports Exchange. Again, the YouTube channel, just go to YouTube and look for South Florida Tribune. Hit the subscribe button. Once you do that, you get all the necessary notifications. www.southfloridatribune.com is a website. South Florida Tribune at gmail.com is to email us. And, of course, you can find us on Twitter at Tribune South. Though, great show. I'll give you guys the weekend off, and then we get to do it again on Monday night. So, meanwhile, enjoy talking Miami Dolphins football. We will talk a great deal more about their draft strategy, although who knows what Greg's going to have. But whatever Greg sends us over the weekend, what we already have, we can be talking about it on Monday. So on behalf of Steve Balestrieri, Rick Curti, and Greg Fuchs, my name is Scott Morganroth, the Motor City Madmouth. Thank you for joining us on this edition of the Sports Exchange. And everybody, have a great weekend, and we will see you next Monday night. Good night, everybody.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night. I don't think Rick and I paid the light bill.